Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to start you off today with my Twitter feed because just like what happened with me on Wednesday when I left before the storms got to Chicagoland area, when I left Jekyll Island, they had some pretty amazing storms that rolled through there as well. So I want to thank Dano for sending these. Just an absolutely stunning view of a shelf cloud coming right here over the beach. And then when I flew home, I was kind of bummed I didn't have a window seat. I love to sit next to the window when I fly just to stare at the clouds. I think a lot of us meteorologists like to do that. But there were just a lot of very large storms, and I want to thank Lucas for sending me this incredible view here of one of the supercells and the cloud structure on the base of the supercell right here going across his part of Wisconsin. And this just kind of brings us back to what's been going on here lately. We've had a lot of thunderstorm activity. You just look here at the past 24 hours across the North America and parts of Central America, and we add up, nearly 500,000 lightning strikes. Now, I believe that Blitzertung only measures the cloud-to-ground lightning strikes, so there are probably quite a bit more than that, because most of the time the cloud-to-ground type of lightning strike makes up only about 20% of total lightning events. I'll have to double-check that. But what this is color-coded by is just age. That's all. So we're looking at the freshest storms in white and the older storms in the darker shades of the colors here. But there's a problem, every time we get to this point in this season with our ability to predict these types of storms. And you've heard me say repeatedly over the last several videos that with this particular setup, we just have to kind of nowcast our way through the day. And that's why I just tend to rely a lot on active satellite data, like I get from the College of DuPage. This is my favorite site, and also their radar data. I just think it's great. I can zoom in and look around and keep an eye on that. So that's a great website if you really want to get that one bookmarked. Now, I apologize. I'm about 50 minutes later than I normally am this morning. I lost internet connectivity this morning. I don't think any good reason, but it finally came back on, so I'm catching up. So the sunrise is almost over to the Rocky Mountains here. And you can see the smoke that's still here, the remnants of the cloud cover from just in some places down here across parts of the mid-south, south, and then back to the southern plains. Just tremendous amounts of rainfall. I'll show you that in a few moments. But if I just take you back through the overnight, you can see what happened yesterday afternoon. We had severe storms in parts of Canada. We had the smoke plumes from the Canadian wildfires stretching all the way here through the Great Lakes. We had multiple complexes of very large storms that ripped through parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest. And then, we can see what happened late in the day here through the central plains of the United States. Now, speaking of that smoke, I do want to show you the forecast. There is an issue with this website this morning. There seems to be a problem with both the high-resolution rapid refresh updating and also the RAP model updating. So we're looking back at the 18Z run from yesterday, but it still goes out 48 hours, which is going to show us what to expect today and tomorrow. So this is vertically integrated smoke, and we can again just see the impact of those wildfires in Canada is pushing that smoke through the northern tier of the United States and eventually getting here into the central plains and parts of the Midwest as well. So be prepared to see quite a bit more smoke coming through there. And the other thing about these storms yesterday that kind of was I'll just say it was a bit of a surprise, was the ability for the storms that came through here to produce quite a bit of hail. So I'm talking about out of the Dakotas through Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. These were better predicted by all of us, but the storm cluster that came through a bit farther to the north was a kind of overachiever, I think is the way to think about it. And this is not to criticize the Storm Prediction Center, because if you're unaware, the Storm Prediction Center, these folks are the best in the business. I'm trying to illustrate the difficulty in forecasting these types of events, because yesterday, and I rely heavily on the SPC and their guidance, we were looking at a marginal risk for severe weather. So it's not as though they didn't, make us aware of the risk. It was just in where the identification was of the greatest risk. These storms kind of came through and surprised. So we add them up here to the previous 2 days, and this is where again we've seen more hail just in the last 3 days here. So this has again been one of those years where tracking of hail events and just the sheer magnitude of damage from those hail events has been just incredible. All right, what about the last bit of rainfall here? In fact, I should, because I'm recording just after 7 a.m. There we go. This is now the last 72 hours through 7 a.m. And as we mentioned, look at the rainfall totals down here. We have parts, this is a 3-day total, by the way. We have parts of the south getting into the mid-south, back into the southern plains, that have picked up more than 6 inches, in some places approaching 10 inches of rainfall. And there's been numerous reports of flooding here, just flooding out towns and flooding out homes. It's been quite terrible. You can also follow the northern track of these storms in through here as well. And some of these places getting much needed rainfall. I'm talking about Iowa, northern Illinois, this part of Michigan, and this part of Wisconsin. This particular spot in Wisconsin had been upgraded on the latest drought monitor, but remember that drought monitor comes out on Tuesday. These rains were here twice. It rained 2 days in a row in parts of Wisconsin, and they desperately needed this. Okay, so thinking about all of that, let's just bring you up to speed with the latest radar imagery through early this morning. So here are yesterday's complexes of storms moving through the overnight. As we arrive at the very end of this animation, I'll just pause it right here at the end. We're still watching a pretty sizable complex of storms early this morning moving through parts of Arkansas, heavy rain. There's heavy rain coming into this part of North Carolina. This has actually prompted a flood watch for this particular area as well. And we can also see another complex of storms rolling through parts of Nebraska. Storm Prediction Center today has got its focus on parts of Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and the southern part of Nebraska here. But again, everywhere that you just see this shade, we will see thunderstorms today. There's a high probability of getting them throughout a big section of the United States given the flow pattern. Going in tomorrow on the 15th, we're going to watch the eastern Great Lakes, parts of the Ohio Valley down through the Appalachian Mountains. And then as we get out there to the 16th, again, just a stretch right in through here, but also not only the risk of stronger storms, but more flooding in parts of New England. And that's just largely because of where the setup is. There's not been much of a change in this. You know, we've kind of got this trough that's hanging off the west coast, this ridge that's building throughout the west, but the deeper low that still sits somewhere near the Hudson Bay, and it's going to send several short waves around the base of it that are going to initiate these storms. You know, after we get into this weekend, the main story will be how big does this ridge become in the southwest? What kind of heat does it produce in that area? And we certainly need to be talking about that. We have subtropical storm Don, who's going to meander out here in the middle of the the Atlantic for a while. And then we have Calvin over here in the Pacific, which is going to be going toward Hawaii. So just a quick update. This is the latest forecast for Hurricane Calvin as it does move toward here, toward the Hawaiian Islands. As is typical, it's very difficult in this part of the Pacific Ocean for these to maintain hurricane strength to get all the way to Hawaii. That doesn't mean they can't, but you do see that it's projected to weaken as it approaches. But sometimes these tropical systems can produce a tremendous amount of rain for Hawaii this particular time of year. Now back to the United States, I want to show you, well, let's go back to the lower 48. And of course, Hawaii is a part of the United States. But I want to show you a couple of things. Around this deeper low through the weekend, we're going to watch multiple little shortwaves like this one right here coming through tonight into tomorrow morning, going through parts of the Ohio Valley. That initiates storms. We then see that as we work our way into Sunday, a piece of that upper level low kind of slides here out of Manitoba into the northern plains. We'll see where that one's going to go in a few moments. But then after that, it's going to be the size of this ridge. Now, there is hope because of this shortwave trough to bring some storms into very dry parts of Canada. You're going to see that one sneak through here by early next week, really next Monday into Tuesday. But then what we get after that is that the models just want to open a massive ridge here. This may be getting up to 600 decameters in height. That would be, several standard deviations above the average. And that ridge just kind of gets planted. And what's interesting is how highly amplified the flow is in the models. So instead of being a bit more broad like this, we see right up the spine of the Rocky Mountains, getting here into parts of the Northern Plains Canadian Prairie. That seems to be where it becomes most amplified. And the models then struggle with what to do on the back side of this in terms of precipitation, because it's difficult to return a lot of moisture when you have such amplified flow into this area. So what we're going to see is when we get out there past the next few days, the models will start to dry this region out a little bit. But we might continue to see storms running over this ridge coming into the places in the country that really need to see more of it. So we'll again look at the high-res models, but we have to understand here that it's just going to give us the general pattern. So we can't look at this and just assume that as we play through this weekend, that this is exactly where the precipitation is going to be. These models are highly sensitive to the initial conditions. And then, of course, as they attempt to forecast and predict convection or storms, that creates their own, their own circulations, their own cold pull, and subsequent thunderstorm development. And oftentimes, if the timing is a bit off, it won't be right. So why I'm just rolling back and forth over this is because I want you to see what the pattern's up to. So this is going through Saturday again and into Sunday. So you just kind of get this general sense of flow like this and flow like this. And about the only thing I see having a bit more confidence in is there is going to be a wave, a short wave that's going to show up here Friday night tonight, getting into Saturday morning, going over the Ohio River Valley, which is going to increase the probabilities of getting some showers and storms in this corridor right in through here. And then later on this weekend, there's that low, kind of breaks off from the main upper level low and spins toward like Lake Superior. Now you add it all up, you get this. So just watch. This is total precipitation through Sunday. And again, this could change a lot, but it's the point in telling you that the storm pattern is open and moving. See that? See how that region there has got quite a bit of it. I will be watching this impulse of moisture here because there are some indications we may bring in some storms off of Mexico, kind of giving us a quick early look at what the monsoon would want to do. But I've questioned its strength going later into the season. All right. Bigger maps here to kind of capture the whole idea. Next 7 days according to the WPC. So a lot of similarities to things we've been talking about as of late. I want to watch this band of rainfall very carefully because moisture is needed throughout all of Canada's prairie right now. And to see the storm staying a little bit farther to the north and not hitting right here along the U.S. border is going to be key. You notice if you get kind of west of this little wedge I drew here, we do see isolated storms but drier conditions. Texas is very hot and dry in through here, and so is the western United States. But more flooding for New England, heavy rains now forecast, some of this coming in right now into North Carolina and Virginia, isolated storms down in the south. So let's just flip it right over to the probability maps. This is looking at the next 10 days, probability of an inch or more. Again, I'm focusing on several areas, but this is one key region we need to be seeing more precipitation getting through. But if we flip this over and then say, well, who's got the best chance at being drier? This is the probability of seeing less than a half inch. And where we've been trending a bit drier in the forecast is right in through this area, which means we're going to have to take a look at what the temperatures are going to do and just really assess previous precipitation in that area to understand what this might mean in terms of stress on a crop in that region. Also, notice how hot and dry Texas is going to be and throughout the west. And as that ridge opens, as you saw a few moments ago, it kind of sits and spins right in through this area. You know, you're going to see isolated storms popping on the mountains that are not well forecast by the models. But coming back throughout Canada, I just want to remind you that still when you look at the precipitation percent of average, we have so much of the prairie here that is, you know, well below 40% of normal rainfall in the last 30 days. So that rain possibly coming through this area will be key to the success of these crops, which are already taking a beating because of how dry it has been as of late. All right, what about week 2? The bigger trends that we saw was a drier trend for the Northwest and a drier trend here. Much more stormy across the south into week 2. And I think this is all just a reflection of where that ridge is going to be. But before I kind of jump on this bandwagon of this pattern, because it's also in the European. Again, look at that corridor right into there with more normal storms into this area. We have to just fully understand the position and strength of the ridge. I hate to count out the GFS right now, but it has got a much different scenario being painted than the European model and the CPC, which is what you see here. Now remember, drier than normal does not mean dry. There could be storms that come through this area, and I still think we're going to see more storms kind of in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest out of this as well. But overall, this is the new week 2 pattern that's come out in the models. So we talk about reasons why, and I just took you out there a week, so this is going all the way out to next Friday. And what I see going into that week 2 time period is this animation showing you the probability of getting at least 1.5 inches of liquid in the atmosphere to precipitate out. And instead of just opening up a larger corridor where we have more of that moisture, it's just not there. And one of the big reasons for that is we just don't have, you know, the pump of moisture coming from a Bermuda high. And as a result, we're going to limit a lot of this moisture down here toward the Gulf Coast and farther to the south. So let's just kind of see where the pattern will be out there again. Trough here in the Gulf of Alaska, highly amplified ridge, and flow that dives into the central part of the United States right in through this region. So this will affect temperatures, but there's questions that remain. Will we get ridge riding storms over the top of this, following that 588 line like we always talk about? Or will the lack of strong moisture return into this area limit the chances of those storms? Those are big questions we're going to continue to ask. And I'll also say this, if we get more smoke here, it's going to follow these lines as we go out here toward the 3rd and 4th week of July. Meanwhile, this will be the epicenter of heat right here in the southern plains of the United States, the Four Corners states. This is a highly, highly amplified ridge pattern, and we're going to see what that's going to do to the temperatures in just a few moments. But because I'm struggling to really resolve the week 2 precipitation forecast, I want to do one last thing here. This is from St. Louis University. It's a fantastic analog suite using the GFS, okay? So it is using the GFS, but the analog part of it is what I like. So their SIPS extended analog threat guidance, we're going to come right over here looking at precipitation. So for the next week, as we can see, where we expect things to be wetter is in through this region. All right. Now from here, though, we want to check out what about through day 10. Whoops, sorry, let's try that again. You start to see some drier signal in this area, but wetter to the south. Now you notice that the GFS itself didn't have this, but it is showing up in the ensemble guidance. All right. So a little bit drier signal in through here, and we get out there fully into that week 2 time frame, day 12 through 14. We do continue to see drier risks, but notice the analogs are bringing in better storms here, better storms along the Gulf Coast as well. So this interplay is going to be critical to see the size of that ridge and what kind of storms get inside of it and how they cascade over the top. I would not suggest that this pattern is well understood by the models or by us forecasters just yet. We need to just keep an eye on its evolution over the weekend. Why this is so important is that dryness in Canada extends into this region. Now, yes, there was rain here yesterday, and we had big storms that ripped through hail into central Minnesota, but these key growing areas here in our upper Midwest northern plains need more moisture. Meanwhile, we needed to kind of slow down, almost shut off right into this particular area for a while. Now, the humidity's been high, the heat has been high in parts of Oklahoma, and you can see here that the moisture from the ground is helping because this map I've been drawn over, by the way, is precipitation ranks since July 1st. Now, it only goes till 7 a.m. yesterday, which means we're not including the flooding rains we had in Mississippi. But you can again see who's had the moisture and who's not had the moisture. Also, take a look here into this part of New England. All right, current temperatures this morning as I started recording, we got down last night into the mid 80s. In like Dallas, Fort Worth, Phoenix got down to 98 degrees last night. A lot of heat across the country, and our all hazards weather map just continues to reflect that. Heat advisories, heat watches, excessive heat warnings stretching from the southern plains of the United States down to the Delta here and then all the way back into the west. This is an air quality alert for the state of Minnesota, and we do have a few places we have flood watches east, all right? So the temperatures, here's today's highs. Now, one area that has got me quite intrigued is this part of Missouri into southern Illinois and parts of Kansas. Now keep an eye in that region. You're going to see cooler air, let me rephrase that, cooler air kind of coming all around it. All the heat is kind of staying south and west of this line except for in this pocket. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow. So just notice much cooler air here. The heat is on. We've talked about this all week, how hot it's going to be from Texas up the west coast. This is getting into Sunday again. That's where the heat tends to stay. Getting into Monday, Tuesday of next week, Wednesday, and Thursday. We're just going to continue this long stretch of days in this area where we keep temperatures upper 90s, low 100s, and that seems to be in the pattern for quite some time after this as well. Our probability maps here looking at this is the ensemble average maps, 5-day sliding window. We always try to get out here quickly to day 5 through 10. And then this is day 10 through 15. Now the question I'm going to have is, does that ridge really open up large enough to deliver this heat into the northern plains that we're seeing or into the Canadian prairie? We are expecting it here and down into Texas, but this will be the key area to watch to see if by the end of July we're bringing in some high heat into that area. A lot of upper 90s possible with that particular pattern. Real quick, I didn't pull this up, so let's go get it real quick. The CPC. This is their map, their newest map on the risk of hazardous temperatures. So you can see they're starting to look for this area here. The 23rd through the 27th is having the excessive heat while they've got it firmly planted into this area during that time frame. Okay, last couple things to talk about. I want to give you some worldwide perspective here. This is the newest update from the European model. And again, heat wave in this part of Central and Southern Europe. We can also see the heat in the west. We're quite warm now through parts of South America, but there's some colder air. It's not really reflected well on this map, but over the next 5 days coming up out of parts of Argentina. Most of Australia is warmer, and if we flip this over quickly to a precipitation map, again, models trended back drier for the North China Plain. They've got just a lot of rainfall in through this part of Southeast Asia and Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines here. A lot of precipitation. I am watching this very carefully. The models continue to suggest there's more active convection coming off of Africa, but you notice we're drier throughout much of Central Europe in this pattern, and the wetter conditions we saw earlier in the week through parts of Argentina now go back over drier, meaning that this wasn't like a full corrective measure on their long-standing drought. It's going to take a lot more rainfall than just that. But speaking of convection coming off of Africa and what the Atlantic could possibly do, we just need to monitor the fact that these ocean temperatures in through here are more than ripe for development of tropical cyclones. I look forward, I think over the weekend we'll get new longer range updates on El Nino and its progress. Right now it's stalled a bit, largely because the trade wind activity is featuring a bit of an easterly wind burst in the near term. And so therefore El Nino's there. The ocean temperatures are well above average, but in terms of its influence on the trade winds, actually, it's the trade wind's influence on it. We're not getting a lot of support for rapid development here in the near term. So we just keep an eye on these things and understand their influences as we talked about all week. And the last thing I think I want to show you out of this, again, is just the latest update on those ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of 30 degree to 32 degree C temperatures. And remember, that's 86 to 90 degree. And we did have, of course, several locations down here off the tip of Florida measuring in the upper 90s in terms of those ocean temperatures. So my concern is that if anything gets in here and starts to brew in terms of a tropical system, it will have just a tremendous amount of heat to extract and then become a powerful tropical cyclone. So that's on the table as we go forward and we start to transition and think more about the hurricane season that's upcoming. But with that, I'm going to tell you all have a great weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday. Thanks.